Attention! A real story verified by a team specializing in the paranormal, with testimonies, images, and received documents. Proceeding may shock or disturb you and affect your emotional and mental state. Watch at your own risk.
My name is David, and what I'm about to tell happened 3 years ago when my wife Rachel and I decided to start over. Start over far from the big city, far from the noise, far from everything that was suffocating us. We bought a house on Maple Street, one of those American suburban neighborhoods that look like they came out of a 1950s movie. Identical houses, perfectly trimmed lawns, white picket fences, the kind of place where nothing bad would ever happen. Or at least that's what we thought. The move happened on an October afternoon. The sky was gray and heavy, as if it carried something invisible. Dry leaves danced along the empty street, and there was a strange silence in the air. No dogs barking, no children playing, just the wind whispering through the trees. Our house was number 47. 2 windows in front, a wooden porch, paint lightly peeling on the edges. Next door, separated only by a low fence, was number 45. Identical to ours, but with the curtains always closed. I didn't see anyone go in or out that first day. My son, Tommy, had just turned 8. He was excited about the move, running from room to room, exploring every corner of the new house. Rachel and I were exhausted, carrying boxes, assembling furniture, trying to turn that empty structure into a home. That's when I heard Tommy shout from the backyard. It wasn't a cry of pain, but of excitement. I ran to the kitchen window and saw him standing by the fence, talking to someone on the other side. A boy. He was about the same age as Tommy, dark hair, pale skin. They seemed to be getting along well. Tommy laughed, waved his arms, pointed to our house. The other boy smiled back, waving. Rachel came up to me, drying her hands on a cloth. "I'm glad he's already made a friend," she said, relieved. I agreed. It really was a relief. Tommy had always struggled to make friends, and seeing him so at ease with the neighbor made me happy. I thought moving had been the right decision. As the sun began to set, the boy simply left. Tommy came inside talking non-stop about his new friend. He said his name was Ethan, that he lived in the house next door, and that they were going to play together every day. That night, while we unpacked a few more boxes, I felt a peace I hadn't felt in months. Maple Street seemed like the perfect place to start over. The first days on Maple Street were exactly what we had expected. Quiet, predictable, almost boring. I had landed a remote job, so I spent most of my time in a makeshift office on the 2nd floor. Rachel worked part-time as a graphic designer, and Tommy would start at his new school the following week. The routine settled quickly. Breakfast at 7, Tommy playing in the yard while I worked, Rachel organizing the house and making lunch. All very normal, all very American. Tommy spent hours in the backyard talking to Ethan through the fence. Sometimes I'd look out the window and see them sitting on the grass, apparently engrossed in some game. Ethan rarely crossed over to our side, and Tommy never went to his house. They seemed content just keeping each other company there on the border between the 2 lots. Rachel mentioned a few times that we should meet Ethan's parents, maybe bring a cake, do that neighborly welcome thing. But there was always something to do, always an excuse to put it off. The truth is, we were so tired from the move that the idea of socializing felt exhausting. Tommy talked about Ethan during dinner. He said Ethan knew all the best places in the neighborhood, that he knew where there was a hidden creek behind the houses, that he had a huge comic book collection, normal kid stuff, nothing that stood out. On the 4th night, after putting Tommy to bed, Rachel and I finally managed to sit on the couch and relax. The house still smelled of fresh paint and cardboard, but it was starting to feel like ours. We watched a movie, had some wine, laughed at silly jokes. Before going upstairs to bed, I went to Tommy's room to make sure he was well covered. The night was cold and the heater wasn't working properly yet. He was sleeping soundly, hugging his worn-out teddy bear. I closed the door carefully and went downstairs to lock up the house. I checked the windows, the front door, the back door, everything secure, everything in order. I went upstairs, turned off the lights, and lay down next to Rachel. That night I slept better than I had in months. No worries, no anxiety, just the comforting silence of Maple Street wrapping around us like a blanket. But it was the last peaceful night we would have in that house. The first strange thing happened the next morning. I went downstairs to make coffee and found the kitchen door that led to the backyard completely open. Not just unlocked, open. The cold October wind was blowing in freely, making the curtains sway. I stood there for a moment trying to understand. I was absolutely sure I had locked that door the night before. I had personally checked it, turned the key, tested the handle, but there it was, wide open, as if someone had gone out in the middle of the night. I called Rachel. She came down in her robe, still bleary-eyed from sleep, and looked at the door with the same confusion as me. "Didn't you lock it last night?" she asked. I assured her I had. She suggested maybe the lock was faulty, that the house was old, that these things happen. It made sense. I accepted the explanation because it was easier than considering the alternatives. I closed the door, locked it again, and went on with my morning. 2 days later, it happened again. Same door, same situation. Wide open when I came downstairs in the morning. This time, Rachel was visibly bothered. "This isn't normal, David," she said, arms crossed. "It must be the lock." I checked the lock more carefully. It seemed to work perfectly. No signs of forced entry, no scratches on the wood, nothing out of place. I decided to install an additional latch, the kind that can only be opened from the inside. That would give us peace of mind. That night, before going to sleep, I not only locked the door but also set the new latch. I tested it 3 times. It was impossible to open from the outside. The next morning, the door was open again. And the latch? It had been undone from the inside. That's when I started suspecting Tommy. Maybe he was coming downstairs during the night, opening the door for some reason. Kids do strange things sometimes. But when I asked, he swore it wasn't him, with those wide, innocent eyes only 8-year-olds can pull off. Rachel suggested maybe it was sleepwalking. Tommy had never shown that behavior before, but the move could have triggered something. We decided to keep a closer eye. Then the other things started. Small things. Objects that moved from place to place. My remote showed up in the fridge. Rachel's car keys disappeared for 2 days and then reappeared on top of the washing machine. The cell phone I was sure I had left on the nightstand was in the bathroom drawer. One afternoon while I was working in the office, I heard laughter coming from the backyard. I looked out the window and saw Tommy and Ethan chatting animatedly. Ethan gestured as if telling a funny story, and Tommy laughed so hard he was holding his stomach. I thought about going down to meet the boy in person, maybe ask about his parents, but a work call interrupted me, and when I finished, Ethan was already gone. That night, around 2 in the morning, I woke up to a noise, a slow dragging like someone was moving furniture downstairs. Rachel was still sleeping deeply beside me. I got up, heart racing, and went down the stairs in the dark. The living room was exactly as we'd left it. Nothing out of place, no sign anyone had been there. But the noise had been real. I'd heard it, I was sure. I went back upstairs, checking Tommy's room on the way. He slept peacefully, tucked up to his neck. I returned to bed but couldn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, when I came downstairs, all the picture frames in the living room were turned upside down. Rachel saw the frames before I did. I heard her scream from the kitchen and ran to the living room. She was standing in the middle of the room, hand over her mouth, staring at the walls. All the frames, every single one, turned upside down. It wasn't just 1 or 2. There were 6 frames spread across different walls. Someone had done that during the night, while we slept just a few feet away, and we hadn't heard anything except that dragging that woke me at 2 in the morning. Tommy came downstairs for breakfast and stopped in the doorway of the living room, looking at the frames with curiosity. "Why are they like that?" he asked, his voice still hoarse with sleep. I asked if it had been him. He said no, but there was something different in his eyes. It wasn't guilt, it was amusement, as if he found it funny. Rachel was shaking. "This isn't normal, David. This isn't a broken lock or objects we forgot where we put. Someone came into our house and did this while we were sleeping." Her voice was on the verge of panic. I decided it was time to act. I installed security cameras that same afternoon. One in the living room, one in the hallway, one pointed at the kitchen door. If someone was entering our house, I would find out who it was. That night, before going to sleep, I checked the cameras 3 times, all working perfectly, recording in real time. Rachel took a sleeping pill. She couldn't rest properly anymore, woke up with any noise, spent the night staring at the ceiling. Around 3 in the morning, I woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Light steps, like a child's. I froze in bed, listening. The footsteps went down the stairs slowly, one step at a time. Then, silence. I got up and went to Tommy's room. The door was ajar. I pushed it open slowly and looked inside. The bed was empty, the covers thrown aside, the pillow still showing the shape of his head. I went downstairs, my heart pounding so hard it seemed to echo through the silent house. Tommy was standing in the living room with his back to me, looking at the wall, just standing there motionless in complete darkness. "Tommy?" I called, my voice coming out weaker than I intended. He didn't answer, he didn't move. I turned on the living room light, and he finally turned to me. His eyes were open, but empty. He was asleep, sleepwalking. Rachel had been right. I took Tommy back to bed, tucked him in, and he didn't even wake up. I went back to my room, relieved to have an explanation. Sleepwalking explained everything. The open doors, the moved objects, the upside-down frames. But the next morning, when I reviewed the camera footage, the relief completely vanished. The cameras had captured Tommy going downstairs, exactly as I'd seen, but they had also captured something I hadn't seen. Before Tommy went down, about 20 minutes earlier, someone had come in through the kitchen door. A small figure the size of a child. The image quality wasn't good in the dark, but you could see it. The figure walked through the living room, turned all the frames back to their normal position, then went upstairs. 5 minutes later, it came back down. And then Tommy appeared. I paused the video and zoomed in on the image. My blood ran cold. The small figure wasn't Tommy, it was another child. And when it passed near the camera, for a split second, the face became visible. It was Ethan. He had come into our house in the middle of the night. He had gone up to Tommy's room, and then he had left, letting my son come down alone, sleepwalking, into the empty living room. I felt rage rise in my chest. That boy was breaking into our house, playing pranks, scaring my family, and worse, he was involving Tommy in it. He had probably taught my son to open the door, to do these stupid pranks. I showed the video to Rachel. She went pale. "We need to talk to his parents now." I agreed this had gone too far, but when I looked out the window that afternoon looking for Ethan in the yard, he wasn't there. And for the first time since we moved in, I noticed something. The house next door, number 45, looked completely abandoned. The grass was far too tall, the windows far too dirty. There was no car in the driveway, no lights on. How could a child live there? I spent the rest of that day watching the house next door, sitting at the office window pretending to work, but with my eyes fixed on number 45. No movement, no sign of life. Just that silent structure, identical to ours, but somehow completely different. Rachel suggested we go there immediately, but something told me to wait. I wanted to see Ethan come out or go in. I wanted to be sure he really lived there before knocking on the door and making a scene with his parents. Night fell, and not a single light came on in the neighbor's house. Not one. The structure remained submerged in darkness, while all the other houses on the street glowed with the warm light of families having dinner, watching TV, living their normal lives. Tommy ate dinner in silence that night. I asked about Ethan, trying to sound casual. "He didn't come to play today," Tommy said, pushing the food around his plate. "He said he had things to do." I asked if he had ever gone into Ethan's house. Tommy shook his head. He said his mom doesn't like visitors. Rachel and I exchanged looks. After dinner, we put Tommy to bed early. He complained but obeyed. We locked his bedroom door from the outside. It wasn't something we liked to do, but we needed to be sure he would stay in there all night. By 11 o'clock, Rachel was already asleep, exhausted from days without proper rest. I stayed up, sitting in the dark living room, laptop open, watching the security camera feeds in real time, waiting. Midnight passed. 1 a.m. 2. My eyes were starting to droop when I heard the first sound, a sharp crack from the front of the house. I jumped up and ran to the living room window. One of the windows had a crack, a thin line running down the glass from top to bottom. I looked at the lawn and saw it. A rock, about the size of a closed fist, resting on the grass just below the window. Before I could process what I was seeing, Another crack. This time the kitchen window. I ran there and saw another crack forming in the glass, another rock on the ground. I flung the kitchen door open and went out into the yard. "Ethan, I know it's you. Stop it now." My voice echoed through the silent street, but there was no answer. Just the cold night wind and the shadows of swaying trees. Then I saw movement. A small figure running along the fence toward House 45. I ran after it, jumped the fence, crossed the abandoned backyard. The figure disappeared through the back door of the neighbor's house. I stopped in the doorway, hesitant. The door was ajar, creaking slightly in the wind. I pushed it slowly and went in. The smell hit me immediately. Mold, damp, abandonment. The house was empty. No furniture, nothing. Just peeling walls and a wooden floor covered in dust and dry leaves that had blown in through the broken windows. "Ethan," I yelled, my voice echoing through the empty rooms. "Your parents are going to hear about this. You can't keep breaking into our house and scaring my family." I heard footsteps upstairs, fast like someone running. I went up the stairs, each step creaking under my weight, threatening to give way at any moment. The second floor hallway was identical to the one in my house, but it was immersed in suffocating darkness. I used my phone's flashlight, the beam cutting through the dark. 3 doors, all open. I looked into the first room, empty. Second room, empty. The third room had the door just barely open. I pushed it slowly. The room was the same size as Tommy's, but completely abandoned. Peeling wallpaper, a broken window letting the wind in. And on the floor, covering almost the entire surface, drawings. Children's drawings made with colored chalk. Hundreds of them. Stick figures representing people. A house, a fence, and always 2 children holding hands. In some drawings, there was a third, larger figure crossed out with violent red lines. My stomach turned. There was something disturbing about those drawings. The obsessive repetition, the faded colors, as if they had been made a long time ago. I heard a noise behind me. I turned quickly. Ethan was standing in the doorway. I finally saw him up close, really up close. His clothes were dirty, the sleeve of his t-shirt torn. His face was smeared with dirt, as if he had been playing in the soil. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why are you scaring my family?" Ethan looked at me with a blank expression. "I'm just playing. Tommy likes to play with me. Throwing rocks at the windows isn't playing. Breaking into our house in the middle of the night isn't playing." He tilted his head to the side, like a dog trying to understand a command. "Tommy promised we'd be friends forever, he promised." I took a step toward him, but Ethan turned and ran. He ran down the hallway, down the stairs. I followed, but when I reached the ground floor, he had disappeared out the back door. I went back to my house, heart pounding out of control. I went straight to Tommy's room and opened the door. He was sitting on the bed, awake, looking at the window. "Tommy, what are you doing awake?" He turned to me, eyes wide. Ethan was calling me. He was outside, tossing little stones at my window. I ran to the window and looked down. The next day, we went to number 45 and knocked on the front door. No answer. I tried the handle. Locked. We walked around to the back where the door I had gone through the previous night was still ajar. Rachel hesitated. "We shouldn't go in like this. It's trespassing." "That boy has trespassed into our house several times," I said, pushing the door. "We just want to talk to his parents." We went in together. In daylight, the house looked even more abandoned. Cobwebs in the corners, layers of dust on every surface, damp stains on the walls. Rachel covered her nose with her hand. "David, no one lives here, it's obvious." But I had seen Ethan, I had talked to him, I had seen the drawings in the bedroom. "Let's check upstairs." We went up the stairs, our footsteps echoing through the empty structure. The hallway was exactly as I remembered. 3 doors open. We went straight to the third room where I had seen the drawings. They were still there. Hundreds of children's drawings covering the wooden floor. Rachel knelt, examining them more closely. "These drawings are old, David. Very old. Look how the chalk has faded. This is years old." I grabbed my phone and called the real estate agency that had sold us our house. After being transferred twice, I finally spoke to someone who knew the street's history. House 45 on Maple Street. Oh yes, it's been empty for almost 5 years. The last resident was an elderly man who passed away. The family never managed to sell it. "And before that?" I asked, looking at the drawings on the floor. "Did a family with children live there?" There was a pause. Let me check. Yes, about 10 years ago. A woman with a son. But they moved after an accident. My stomach tightened. What kind of accident? Her son disappeared. It was a terrible thing. The police searched for weeks but never found the boy. The mother moved out a few months later. She couldn't live in that house anymore. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. Rachel looked at me, waiting for an explanation. The last child who lived here disappeared 10 years ago, I said, my voice coming out weaker than I intended. Rachel went pale. So who is Ethan? I had no answer. We left that house and went straight to the one across the street. An elderly lady answered, smiling, until she saw our expressions. We asked about House 45, about Ethan, about any children who lived on that street. She slowly shook her head. There are no children in this part of the street, dears. Only you have a young child. That's why I was so happy when I saw a young family moving in. I thought it would bring new life to the neighborhood. But my son has been playing with a boy, I insisted. A boy named Ethan. He said he lives in the house next to ours. The lady's expression changed. Something passed through her eyes. Fear. Recognition. Ethan, she repeated, voice low. That was the name of the boy who disappeared. Ethan Miller. The world seemed to tilt under my feet. Rachel grabbed my arm to steady herself. This doesn't make sense, she murmured. Tommy was playing with someone. We saw it. You saw it on the cameras. We went back home in silence. Tommy was exactly where we had left him, watching cartoons. I sat next to him on the couch. Tommy, I need you to be very honest with me. Ethan, is he real? Do you really see him? Tommy looked at me as if I'd asked the strangest question in the world. Of course he's real, Dad. He's my best friend. And where is he now? Tommy pointed to the window. There, by the fence. He's always there. I stood up slowly and walked to the window. I looked at the fence that divided our yard from the abandoned one. No one was there. Just the old wooden fence and the tall grass swaying in the wind. Tommy, there's no one there. My son frowned, confused. He stood and came to the window, looking out. But he was just there. He was waving at me. Rachel began to cry silently. I picked Tommy up, even though he was already too big for that, and hugged him tightly. Son, I think he isn't who you think he is. That afternoon we packed our bags. It didn't matter how much money we had invested in the house. It didn't matter that we had just moved in. We couldn't stay there, not after discovering the truth. As we carried the boxes to the car, Tommy stood on the porch looking at the house next door. Ethan is sad, he said, his voice small. He said I promised to stay. Don't look over there, Tommy, Rachel said, her voice firm but trembling. Get in the car now. Before getting in the car, I looked one last time at House 45, and for a brief second, I swear I saw it. A small figure in the second-floor window, standing still, watching us leave. I blinked and the figure was gone, but the feeling remained. The feeling that something had tried to take my son, and almost succeeded. We drove for hours that day, with no set destination, just wanting to put distance between us and Maple Street. Tommy slept in the back seat, emotionally exhausted in a way an 8-year-old shouldn't be. Rachel looked out the window in silence, tears drying on her face. We stopped at a cheap roadside hotel, an anonymous place with thin walls and the smell of disinfectant. But it was safe. It was far from that house, far from that street, far from Ethan. That night, the three of us slept in the same bed, Tommy between us, safe, protected. But I couldn't close my eyes. Every sound in the hotel made me jump. Every door slamming, every step in the hallway, every car passing outside. I kept seeing that figure in the window, that last glimpse before we left. And I kept asking myself over and over, what would have happened if we had stayed one more night? If we had given Ethan more time to finish whatever he was trying to do? In the days that followed, we found a temporary apartment across town. Small, cramped, but with noisy neighbors and life pulsing around, the complete opposite of Maple Street. It took Tommy weeks to stop asking about Ethan. Why did we have to leave so fast, he asked, confused and hurt. Ethan was my friend. He's going to be alone now. We didn't know how to explain. How do you tell a child that the friend he played with every day might never have been real? Or worse, that maybe he was something that shouldn't exist. Rachel started therapy. The sleepless nights, the constant fear, it all took a toll. She had recurring nightmares about that house, about doors opening by themselves, about footsteps in the hallway. I tried to be strong. I tried to keep the family together, to keep things normal. But at night, when everyone slept, I lay awake, thinking about all the signs we ignored. The open doors, the moved objects, the upside-down frames. Thinking about how we almost lost our son to something we couldn't understand. Months later, I got a call from the real estate agency. They had managed to sell our house on Maple Street, a young family with 2 children. My stomach turned. I wanted to call back, to warn them, to tell them what had happened. But what would I say? That a child who disappeared 10 years ago was haunting the house next door. That he tried to take our son. Who would believe that? So I didn't call. And to this day, it eats me up inside. Tommy is better now. He made new friends at school. Real friends with parents we know, with houses we visit. He rarely mentions Ethan. But sometimes, when he thinks I'm not looking, I see him standing at the apartment window, looking down at the street. And I wonder if he still sees Ethan, if that friendship, whatever it was, really ended when we left Maple Street. We sold the house, we moved, we rebuilt our lives. But a part of me is still stuck in that night, standing in the abandoned backyard of House 45, looking at those drawings on the floor, drawings of 2 children holding hands. And I wonder, every night before bed, if we did enough, if we left in time, or if something of Tommy was left behind in that house, in that impossible friendship. This is my story. The story of how I almost lost my son to something I can't explain. Something logic rejects, but my heart knows was real. I know many of you will think it was just a troubled neighborhood kid, a disturbed boy playing cruel pranks. Maybe even Tommy having sleepwalking episodes that coincided with the break-ins. I wanted to believe that too. It would be much easier. But I can't forget those drawings on the floor. I can't forget the feeling that something was trying to steal my son, slowly and methodically, night after night. I can't forget the look on Tommy's face when he said Ethan was sad because he had promised to stay. Promised who? Promised what? Those questions haunt me to this day. I share this story not to scare you, but to warn you. If you're thinking of moving to a quiet neighborhood, to one of those perfect streets where nothing bad ever happens, pay attention. Pay attention to the abandoned houses. Pay attention to the imaginary friends your children make. And most of all, pay attention when something inside you says something is wrong. Don't ignore that instinct. Don't wait until it's too late. Because some friendships come at a price and some promises can't be broken. If you've been through something similar, if you felt that something was trying to take someone you love, leave your comment below, share your story. Maybe together we can understand what really happens in those silent houses, on those streets too perfect to be true. And if you know Maple Street, if you know House 45, if you know the story of Ethan Miller, please tell me. Because I need to know. I need to understand what almost took my son. I need to know if we're still safe, or if Ethan is still looking for Tommy. Subscribe to the channel for more real horror stories. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single account. And leave in the comments. Do you believe in friends who never go away?